Sanam, you just hear what Ashley was saying there, where she said that the humanitarian toll could spark a refugee crisis. Now, one of the countries that is witnessing this already is Iran.
Indeed, and frankly, Delano, we've been here before. Resource-poor countries like Lebanon and Jordan bearing the blunt of the Syrian war, and now Iran. So, of course, the country is bracing itself for a wave of refugees, perhaps one of the biggest ones it's ever experienced. In fact, last weekend alone, Delano, we witnessed over 200 Afghans going over the Milak border. But for the time being, it seems somewhat manageable because you have the UNHCR that is providing assistance to those new arrivals, whether it's with food or water. But I think the bigger question that we need to ask ourselves here is something like this sustainable without the palpable support of the international community? But absolutely not. You're talking about Iran, a country that's already under a plethora of international sanctions, one that can't really provide enough resources for its own population. And of course, a part of that is largely because of endemic corruption and mismanagement inside the country. Now, earlier, I spoke to a source close to the Iranian leadership, Delano, who said that Europeans are concerned they're falling over themselves when it comes to dealing with just thousands, even tens or hundreds of thousands of refugees. But you have a country like Iran that's been dealing with millions of them. A side note here, Iran does host one of the largest refugee populations in the entire world. Now, before we end this segment together, Delano, I do want to turn our attention to how Afghans inside the country are treated. Now, because they have been fleeing to Iran over the past 4 decades because of this rather protracted conflict, what it's meant is that they're being used as pawns, they're being used as leverage when it comes to Tehran's negotiations with the international community. And there have been reports of Afghans being forcefully deported from Iran. Now, for those that do manage to stay inside the country, it's a very tricky situation. Why? Because it's very difficult for them to gain access to refugee status, which means that they can't really cast their ballot when it comes to Iran's elections. Children have no access to school, adults don't have access to higher education, and the majority of Afghans can't get official work. So what do they have to do? Manual labor, which means work that is more dangerous potentially and poorly paid. I want to end on this note. According to Afghanistan's first woman deputy Speaker of Parliament, Fawzia Kufi, who I'd interviewed in the sort of recent years, what she said was that this dire situation of the refugees in Iran will not improve. In fact, it could exacerbate for as long as Iran, for its part, refuses to collaborate with NGOs and the international community doesn't really offer a helping hand and doesn't chip in.